Hi, welcome to another Sweet 16 Sunday post. I'm Paula Storm, and today I wanted to show you a few things. First of all, I wanted to show you how, or a different way you can transfer a pattern onto your fabric, and then I just wanted to have a bit of a mess around with some new metallic threads that I've got. So, but first of all, what I want to show you is this is my little template here. I've just gone to my computer and I've printed out my son's name on some fabric. What I could do is take this to my my window or a light box and trace it onto my fabric, but in this case, using a marking pen of some sort, but in this case I'm actually using quite a dark colour, and so it was a bit difficult for me to see through the fabric to trace my pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the thread out of my needle, out of my Sweet 16, and I'm actually just going to use an old needle, so I'm due to change this needle anyway, so I'm just going to use my blunt needle, and I'm going to run around, I'm going to slow my needle right down, and I'm going to run around the outside of the letters. You've probably seen this done before, but I'm just going to run around the outside of the letters and pierce some little holes all around the outside of the design. I've slowed my speed right down. It's set on 12 at the moment just because I want this to be quite accurate. Whoops. This is a really great way to get muscle memory too. So if you have a design that you've been wanting to stitch out onto your piece, you can actually just trace it out on paper and then practice like this. So I've finished my first letter. I'm going to move on to the second. Okay, so I'm done with the pounce, marking the holes. Now I'll grab my pounce and we'll put it onto our fabric. Okay, so I've got my stencil traced and hole punched, and I've got my little sandwich here. I've got my fabric behind it, and then I'm going to take my little quilt pounce. Now this one is full of white chalk, and I'm going to use that because it'll be the easiest to see on this blue fabric. So first of all, the quilt pounce, you don't actually want to pounce it onto your fabric, you want to just rub it. So to get the chalk flowing, I'm just going to tap it once on the table like that, and then I'm going to take my pounce out, and I'm just going to rub the pounce onto my fabric. I'm just going to rub like that, and then hopefully I just hold one edge and I peel it up, and there we go, that's transferred perfectly. I've got my little stencil now. I can use that as a guide for my quilting. So let's go back to the machine now and we'll have a bit of a play with some metallic threads. Okay, so before we get stitching, I just wanted to have a quick chat about threads and what to choose. This thread I've actually chosen because it's by a brand that I trust. Not all metallic threads are made equal, and quite often you'll end up, if you buy a cheaper thread, you'll end up wanting to throw your project out because it can be so frustrating when your threads shred or fray or they break every 5 seconds. So make sure you get yourself a good thread. This one, as I said, is by Superior. I've found that I just really love Superior threads. I've almost never had a problem with their threads. I like using bottom line in my bobbin, and today this is actually the first time I've ever tried these threads. I bought this metallic for a particular project, and so I just wanted to test it out on a smaller project first, see what size needle works with it, see how well it stitches, so that when I get to my big quilt I know what's going to work. So the other thing to consider when you're buying your threads is your needles. So this brand, the Superior Threads, tells you on the inside of the cone what size needle you need to use with this weight of thread. So in this case, it's telling me that for a long arm machine, which is what the Sweet 16 is considered to be, a long arm machine, even though it's a mid arm, it's calling for a number 18 needle. So I've gone to my little needle box and I've had a look. You'll notice that all of these have the number 10 there. That's not actually the number of the needle. The number of the needle is on the side on the right. So this is my number 18 needle. So that's the ones I'm going to use with this. So you can actually just pop open one of these, tip it up, and your needle will pop out. Now one thing to look for and make sure of when you get your needles is to make sure that there's a groove down the front. That groove is really important with all stitching really, but especially with metallics, because that groove will kind of nest your thread inside the groove and it will protect it as it's going in and out of the fabric so many times. So needles, really important. Make sure you're using the right size needle for your thread. And another thing that I've found really useful is these little nets. These nets are fantastic to make sure your threads are feeding smoothly off the, especially when you're using cones. So to put that on, I've got the thread coming out the top there, and I'm just going to feed that net over the bottom, and that will just help the thread to feed nice and smooth off the top there. So I'm going to thread up the machine and then we're going to have a play with the metallic threads. Okay, so I'm all ready to go now. I've got my thread, my machine threaded up with my metallic thread, and what I'm going to do first is just this small circle in the middle here. As always, I'm just going to bring up my bobbin thread, so I'll pull that one up. You want to be quite gentle with your metallic thread. If it's pulling or anything, you need to make sure that you loosen off your tension a little bit, just so that it doesn't fray that thread. So I'm just going to sew a few stitches in one place just to secure those threads. Move that out of the way. Okay, so I've done that center. Now there's a feature that I did mention quickly in one of my other videos, but if you just hold the needle up, needle down button, it will actually sew a few stitches in place, and that will effectively tie off a little knot for you. Now another trick that I have, when you're pulling your fabric to, or pushing your fabric to bring that bobbin thread up, if you pull the fabric to the back, there'll be actually less pressure on your needle. So pull the fabric to the back to get that extra bit of thread there so that you can pull your bobbin up. I'm just going to tap my needle, bring it up again, get my bobbin and snip all those threads off. Done. Okay, so now I'll go back to the start. Let's start here. Bring my bobbin up once again. Now I'm using the Superior Threads bottom line in my bobbin here, so it's nice and fine. So let's just sew a few stitches in one place, and then I'll rearrange my hands. I might actually turn it this way because I feel more comfortable pushing away from myself. So to start with, I'm going to spin it round. When I'm outlining something, which is what I'm doing with this letter, I'll keep my speed a bit slower. So I've got my speed set on, I think it's about 35 at the moment. And then when I go into my free motion work, I'll speed it up a little bit. So I'm going to echo around that whole name just to make sure it stands out against the background filler that I'm going to do later. So I'm going to start anywhere, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to echo about 1/4 of an inch outside of what I've just stitched. So once again, bring out my bobbin thread. And I'm not going to echo each individual letter, I'm just going to echo the word. So I'm just going to tie off those threads. So something's pulling a little bit, so I'm just going to check all my threading. So you can see I'm not actually echoing each individual letter, I'm echoing the whole word as a whole, so it will stand out for me. there we go. I'm just going to tie off again. Now if I was going to use this same thread for the filler, I would actually not worry about tying off here. I would just go into my filler. But I'm really happy with how that silver has stitched. I can't see any skipped stitches or anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out this thread and I'm going to switch over to my other thread, which is this, this blue colour that I wanted to try. And we'll see how that one stitches, and then I'll know whether these threads will be suitable for my big project that I want to do. So I'll just switch out my threads and I'll show you a little bit of my quilting. So I've switched out my threads. I've now got my blue metallic thread in, and I just wanted to point out something else that I wanted to just mention quickly. You can see here on my batting, I've got a label of actually what type of batting I'm using. I really like to leave those little labels on, or put your own labels on your batting, so that you know on these sample pieces you know exactly what type of batting you've used, so that you know how it's going to feel in a finished big project. These little samples, I usually just turn these into either a little cushion or a placemat, something like that. My kids just love having their names on anything, so I put my practice pieces to really good use. Now with this piece, I've decided I want to try out a few different stitches, so I'm actually going to section off this piece to give me different sections so I can try different styles of quilting and see what I like and what I'm going to use in my big piece. So I'm just going to bring up my bobbin as usual. And I'll start sectioning off my piece. I'm just going to adjust my speed and make it a little bit faster. That tension feels a little bit tight to me, so I'm just going to loosen that off. Actually, that's... check my tension. That looks good.